Welcome to the Westport Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Welcome, everyone. Got a lot of people here tonight. My name is Karen Savell, and I'm the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Fairfield County. The world has turned upside down since October the 7th, and we are so pleased tonight to partner with the Westport Library and Fairfield University, who share our goal to foster critical conversations in our community. It's wonderful to see the room filled with so many people who are interested in learning more about the current situation in Israel. This evening is the brainchild of Sonia Ben Yehuda, who is here with us tonight and is a member of the Federation's Israel and Overseas Committee. Thank you for your courage to bring this program to our community. We also want to give a large thank you to Nancy Diamond, who worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail was perfect. Thank you both. We've had some time to spend with our guests over the last couple of days, and I can tell you that we are in for a fascinating conversation. So let's get started. I'm delighted to bring up to the stage on our panel tonight. Please note that after the conversation, we're going to open up the audience to questions, so watch out for our staff. Federation staff is going to be walking around with cards and pencils. If you have questions, raise your hand, and they will give you an index card. Please write your questions down, and then we'll pass them to the moderator. So let's start. Join me in welcoming our guests tonight. Shlomi Eldar is a journalist and documentary filmmaker who has spent more than 30 years covering Gaza, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority. During this time, he reported on the emergence of Hamas from its inception to the mass social and political movement that would eventually come to power in Gaza. In 2007, Shlomi was awarded the prestigious Sokolov Prize, Israel's most important media award for his work. Please welcome Shlomi Eldar. Dr. Yuval Biton retired from the Israeli prison service after more than 25 years, where he was head of the Israeli Prison Service Intelligence Division. Dr. Biton knows Sinwar personally. While the Hamas leader was serving a more than 20-year sentence in an Israeli prison, Dr. Biton was on the medical team that removed his brain tumor. And he has spent many, many hours with the Hamas leader over the years. On October 7th, Hamas kidnapped and murdered Dr. Biton's nephew. Please welcome Dr. Yuval Biton. Should we sit in the middle? In the middle, thank you. And our moderator tonight is no stranger to us. Please welcome Dr. Glenn Diner. He is the Carl and Dorothy Bennett Professor of Judaic Studies and the director of the Bennett Center at Fairfield University. He's a recent Guggenheim Fellow and just published a new book entitled The Light of Learning, Hasidim in Poland on the eve of the Holocaust. That's Oxford University Press 2024. Please help me welcome Dr. Glenn Diner. Thank you again for being here, and enjoy this amazing conversation.
Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We should really give a big thank you to the Jewish Federation of Greater Fairfield for making this possible. Also, the Bennett Center, Fairfield University. As director of the Bennett Center, my hope is that this program will help forward our mission, which is really to work towards coexistence in such a polarized time, when too many of us are seduced by maximalist positions that deny self-determination to one group or another. I think it's important to realize the Jews aren't going anywhere, the Palestinians aren't going anywhere, and we have to try to find our way to coexistence. I'd like to read something by the Israeli writer Etgar Keret that I just saw today. A couple of weeks ago, he writes, I watched the Egyptian-American comic Rami Youssef's opening monologue on Saturday Night Live. Towards the end, he talked of praying for God to stop the violence and to free the people of Palestine. And the audience responded with raucous applause. As a world-weary Israeli, I diagnosed the enthusiastic crowd as liberal, pro-Palestinian New Yorkers. But a second later, Youssef said he was also praying for all the hostages to be freed, that is, the Israeli hostages, and was met by equally loud applause. That was when I understood that unlike my social media feeds, where there's a clear-cut split between Israel lovers and Israel haters, the rest of humanity is mostly very human. When it sees a panicked young Israeli woman being dragged into Gaza, it wants her to be released. When it sees a hungry Palestinian family huddled under a makeshift tent, mourning its dead, it wants their suffering to stop. Yes, I know, a lot of people will now jump up to explain that you can't compare Palestinian suffering to Israeli suffering, or Israeli suffering to Palestinian suffering, and that one side is to blame while the other side was simply left with no choice. But beyond all the explanations and reasonings, however impassioned, there remains one basic truth: suffering is suffering, and it's only human to want it to end as soon as possible. I think if we're all honest with ourselves, thank you. If we're all honest with ourselves, we're not entirely sure what to feel and think after the events that transpired on October 7th. Tonight, we can at least gain some clarity about Hamas. We have with us two real experts with intimate knowledge about Hamas and really the people who compose Hamas. We're so fortunate to have Shlomi Eldar and Yuval Biton to help shed light on these questions. So without further ado, I'd like to begin our discussion now. Perhaps each of you can tell us briefly your story as it relates to Hamas. How also has October 7th affected you personally, changed your perception of Hamas, or perhaps not changed your perception at all? Shlomi, you want to start? Go ahead. So polite.
Yes, on October 7th at 6:30 in the morning, we've heard the siren. We entered to the safe room, and it was very intensive. My wife, she's here, and she said it's something is hiding a huge operation from Hamas. And I told her, no, you know, you're not the expert of Hamas. I'm the one who's an expert of Hamas. And she's right. My wife, she's right every time. And when I've heard the evening that we have more than 1,000 people who were murdered, it changed my perception of Hamas. First of all, it's my mourning. I was sad. I started to cry. I took a flag and put in my balcony the Israeli flag. I felt patriotic. But the second question that I asked myself, this is not Hamas that I've known for many, many years. I followed Hamas since the founding of the Hamas in 1987 in Gaza Strip. I entered to Gaza Strip in 1991 as a journalist, report for the Israeli TV. And it's not a behavior of Hamas. And my first question, I asked myself, where did I wrong? Because Hamas has something that was unique for the behavior of the movement since the beginning. There is two professors in Israel, Dr. Avraham Sela and another, they wrote a book about Hamas, the first book about Hamas. They put a term of Hamas behavior, calibrated violence. That Hamas all the time knew their boundaries, how they can attack Israel and not sacrifice the movement. And what happened in October 7th I've realized that something huge happened in Hamas, and we didn't see it. Because Hamas, the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, and Mohammed Deif, the head of Izzadin al-Qassam brigades, put Hamas in a danger. They all the time was afraid that they will be eliminated by Israel, and all the time tried to find the balances, what they called, as I said before, calibrated violence. And it was broken. So at the same day, I started a new research about Hamas. What did we know about Hamas and what we don't know about Hamas? And it was my new research.
First, I want to apologize about my English. It's not my first language, not the second, even not the third. But I will try. In the October 7, I was in my house, and my daughters called me from Japan. She was released 3 months before the attack, after she was an officer in the Israel aircraft. And she told me, what's happening in Israel? And I said, what's happening in Israel? And she said, the Hamas attacks Israel everywhere. And when I show the film from Sderot with the cars, with Hamas cars, I said, this is a war. Because I knew Hamas very well, 26 years, since 1996, when I started my career as a dentist, and after 12 years, I was appointed as an intelligence officer in Ktiot, and I knew very well the leaderships of Hamas. I don't was a surprise of the Hamas attack against Israel. We must understand that Hamas make a war, religious wars against Israel. Sinwar told me in 2004 that they will attack Israel maybe after 20 years. And they will attack Israel when they recognize that Israel become weakness. And I think that in the last years, the situation in Israel was a difference, and Hamas wrong and Sinwar wrong that he thought that we are weak, and we are became a weakness because what's happened in Israel in the law, in the justice,
reform.
And I knew Hamas, I knew the
Judicial reforms. Judicial reforms.
Yes. I knew the Hamas. I knew how they thinking, the mode of the thinking of Hamas. They don't change. And they just waiting for the moment to attack Israel. They make a religious war. We don't have a right as Israelis, as a Jewish, we don't have a right on the Israelis' land. Is a Muslims' land. They are not talking about a peace in the 67 borders or 40 years borders. We don't have a right in this region. Because of that,
Okay, but clearly you're sort of saying different things, right? Because Shlomi's saying something changed with Sinwar, right? There's a radicalization that took him by surprise. I think you're saying it didn't take you by surprise.
Because the leaderships in the prison are military leaderships. They are not a policy leaderships. After Shalit deal, they were released and they took over of the leaderships outside.
Yes.
In Gaza and outside in Hamas in general leaderships?
My different perspective, I met Yuval about in October, I think, a month later after the war broke out, and I invited him to my podcast, and he came. It was the first time that I saw him. He was in charge in the Israeli prison, and he met the military wing that I've never met. I've never met Yahya Sinwar because when I entered Gaza Strip, it was in 1991, and he was in prison in Israeli jail. I met all the political leaders of Hamas. One of them, he was used to call my friend Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the Hamas, the head of the political bureau. And it's totally different. So it's different thoughts. Because when I've met the Hamas leaders, the old Hamas leaders in 1991, 1994, I've met Ismail Haniyeh that called me to his house and offered me a hudna, a ceasefire for 25 years. And he told me, please go to Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli prime minister, and give him my suggestion, our Hamas suggestion, because they felt they were very weak. When Hamas felt weak, they tried to find or declare a ceasefire for 25 years. So he met the military wing, I met the political wing. And when we've met together, we combine it together. So this is the real Hamas.
In Shalit deal, as example, who took the decision about the deal is not Haniyeh or Khaled Mashal outside. Who took the decisions is Sinwar and Aruri. Because Salah al-Aruri is the leaders of Hamas from West Bank. There is a big difference between Gaza and the West Bank. From the West Bank, they are more moderate than Hamas from Gaza. But who paid the price of the struggle and who was in the prison 20 years on the society of the Palestinian, he becomes stronger. When he was released, he became a leader of Hamas.
So you mean it gave him status, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Gave him great status to be the leader in prison.
They learned about the Israel society, about the Israel politics. They knew us. And if they pay the price, they become more stronger. Then Haniyeh was all the time outside.
Yes. And those who don't know, Haniyeh is would you call him the political leader of Hamas?
He's a political leader. He was a teacher in the high school in Rafah, in Ashati refugees camp. He was very close to Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, who founded the Hamas movement, and he was his assistant. And when Israel assassinated all the other leaders, he found himself alone in the top of the Hamas movement, and he was appointed. In 2006, they put Ismail Haniyeh at the top list of the Hamas party. And they put his name, they named him on the top list because even Hamas thought that he's moderate. It's moderate leader, then he can capture more voters from outside Hamas members. And that's what he did. He was elected in 2006. But many people around the world in the international community, they forgot that what was done in Gaza Strip. In Gaza Strip, in 2007, was a military coup. The military wing did a military coup in Gaza Strip. They kicked out the PLO from their position and took the power in Gaza Strip. And when we talk about the representative of the Palestinian in Gaza Strip, it was taken by power, not by the elected. They was elected in 2007 for the parliament, not for presidency. And they kick out the PLO. And the time was the West Bank and Gaza Strip was divided.
I was close to Sheikh Yassin, but Sinwar was also close. He was the founder of the military forces of Hamas. And I'll say, Shlomi said in 2007, it was a revolution.
Yes, military coup.
A Fatah against Hamas. And in the prison, the leaders of Fatah understood the first time that the enemies of Fatah is not Israel, it's Hamas, first of all, because Hamas kills Muslims, not Jewish.
And Fatah, for those who don't know, is the Palestinian Authority, who's considered more moderate and possible leaders of a Palestinian state one day. And okay, so I need to ask you a very painful question. Of course, you helped to save Sinwar's life, and ironically, a tragic irony, your own nephew has been kidnapped. I don't know what to say about this other than I'm extremely sorry. I know you're a professional. That's you're doing your job. This is, you're a medical professional, okay. But it's just incredible to me, just the overall theme of not just you, but Israelis living along the border in these border kibbutzim who had, Gaza residents in their homes, who fought, were activists for peace, and somehow it just didn't matter. There was just no gratitude to speak of, right? And I know you've explained this before in Hebrew, so I'm hoping you can just explain a little bit in English your theory about this. What we see as ingratitude just doesn't matter, it seems.
Well, I saved his life, Sinwar's life. It was my duty, a professional duty. We are not motivated by revenge or by hate. We don't hurt our enemies. We are not like them. This make us to be more stronger, not weakness. And I don't think so that everyone, even doctor or guards, should take the law in his hand. There is a court in Israel. They took the decision about the punishment. He's in the prison. And this is our duty as the Israelis, as a Jewish. And I was asked many times if I regret that I saved his life. I'm not. As I said, this is my duty. Tamir, my nephew, he's a member of Kibbutz Nir Oz. He was in an emergency team. They were just 5 at that day. And they fought against hundreds of terrorists who were invited to the kibbutz. Tamir and other 4 members in Nir Oz fought about 2 hours and a half. The army did not come to the kibbutz until 3 p.m. They did not arrive to the kibbutz. And Tamir and his friends killed about 14 terrorists, but they did not have any choice. Tamir was kidnapped when he was injured, and he was dead after 7 hours in Gaza. I know that the person who I saved his life is responsible directly on my nephew's death. I know that he knew about yes, I know it.
Okay.
And I sent a message by the Israel television.
Yes.
And I think that he know, and I don't have any expectation from him. I knew Hamas and I knew Sinwar.
Our biggest failure in October 7th, the example of Nir Oz, it's the biggest example to understand the failure. The army didn't come for 8 hours. 8 hours. The attack in Nir Oz started about 7 o'clock. The first time the kibbutz members saw the army after the terrorists left the kibbutz. So there is no explain. I think that we have to investigate it, but we don't know what happened. And as you said, ironically, his nephew was kidnapped by Hamas members. Yuval tried to send messages to Yahya Sinwar by the Israeli TV. I tried to find any members of Hamas leaders that we can send them messages and just say, you've been saved by Yuval, and try to keep his nephew alive. But I think 2 months ago, they got the sad message that he was died in Gaza Strip.
From Nir Oz, 75 members were kidnapped, yes, and 400 were dead. Yafa Adar is the grandmother of Tamir's, and Nir Oz, what's happening in Nir Oz is a little Holocaust.
So Shlomi, you had somewhat of a, not similar, but reminiscent kind of experience when you made your film about saving a child from Gaza. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the mother's surprising reaction?
Yes. In 2009, I directed my first documentary, Precious Life, about a Palestinian mother who came to the Israeli hospital. His baby, he was 4 months old, and he had a genetic disease. 2 of his sisters died from the same disease. And anonymous Israeli donate $55,000 to save his life, and his son was killed during his service in the IDF. And after the operation, the bone marrow transplant, she said, I wish he will be martyr and fight for Jerusalem. I was shocked because her baby was saved by the Israeli. But at the end of the film, we figure out that she was afraid that she was be considered by the Palestinians as a collaborate with the Israelis. So that's why she said what she said. And I think that it's remind me something very important that happened in Gaza Strip. Since Sinwar released from the Israeli jail in 2011 and was elected in 2017, the first time as the leader of Hamas in Gaza Strip. Beside strength the Hamas army and beside built tunnels, they started brainwashing in Gaza Strip. And it was so huge and for them very easier because they spent the money to build tunnels. The people, the residents in Gaza Strip were so poor, they came to the mosque and it was a kind of deal. We'll give you a hot meal and you'll study the Quran. And they gave the surah, the phrase of the Quran, different interpretation. What they used for him to be useful for them, for what they planned the war against Israel. And the brainwashing was that the Jewish, the Israelis, are like Bani Quraysh, the Quraysh tribe in the Muhammad era, that they are not human beings and they should be killed by them. And they are the Hamas, they are the messenger of the God wills. So that's what I saw. I think I started to see in 2009 with Raida Abu Mustafa, the mother that came to the Israeli hospital. And we see it extremely in October 7th. I saw the IDF film. It was terrible. And the last scene in this film that edited by the IDF, they took footages from the Nukhba, from the terrorists, that a body camera, and built a film to see their crew. At the end of the film, I saw things that reminds me of the Holocaust. A truck with full of burned bodies. And they butchered babies and killed families. Raped and kidnapped old people. And I think that I said before, this is it's not Hamas that I've known for many, many years. Two things. They gave them drugs and brainwashing. And this is the new Hamas that was shaped by Yahya Sinwar.
Sinwar kills in Gaza 12 Palestinians who were suspected as collaborations with Israel. In the prison, he kills 2 prisoners from Hamas also.
Okay, so we're all very depressed now. We're despairing completely because we have this clearly, I would say, genocidal-minded leader. We have brainwashed children. We have religious fanaticism. The question that I always ask, and the argument that I always get into with friends is, does that represent all Palestinians? How popular is Hamas? I know they're not allowed to really say because it's not a free society, but can you give us any kind of hope or nuance to all this?
Yes. I've been in Cairo 2 weeks ago. I flew as a journalist for Haaretz newspaper, and I know that some of my friends escaped from Gaza Strip, and I wanted to hear their voices to bring them to the Israeli public opinion. Because when it's 6 months ago that the war started, and we've never heard any witness from Palestinians. I have friends from the Fatah. They were leaders of the Fatah movement, and I met them in Cairo. And I think the first time that I've heard what they feel when they saw what happened in Gaza Strip. In Gaza Strip, in 2001, they made Hamas a conference a day after conference, and they really believed that they conquer Israel. I would like to read some notes that they published after this conference. And my friend, one of them, his name is Sufyan Abu Zaida. He was a minister, a president minister in the Mahmoud Abbas government, and very respected man. And they told me, first of time, when we've heard about this conference, we thought it's something small. It's about lunatics, people from Hamas, the extremist lunatics from Hamas that made any conference and just dream about conquering Israel. But when we've heard that the leaders of Hamas participated in this conference, we've understand something happened in Hamas. Many Palestinians that I talked with during these years hate Hamas. They thought that this organization that become corrupted, like Mahmoud Abbas or Yasser Arafat government. By the way, Hamas was elected in 2006 because it was a revenge of the Palestinian with the corruption of the PLO. And what happened in 2021, it was a military coup, the second military coup in Gaza Strip. Yahya Sinwar took control. He lost the election in 2021. It was election. He lost the election, and they forced the representative of the poll to change the election. And this conference for the Palestinian, the moderate Palestinian, was the sign of something happened. I'd like, if you mind, if you give me just to read some Quincy's conclusion they published after this conference. We have a registry of the numbers of the Israeli. They dream the dream that they conquer Israel, and this is the day after, and the day after will be soon in about a month. And if the intelligence of the Israelis' intelligence was open, it was a big sign for what is going to happen. We have a registry of the numbers of the Israeli apartments and institutions, educational institutions, school, gas stations, power station, and sewage system, and we have no choice but to get ready to manage them. And more than that, in dealing with the Jewish settlers on Palestinian land, there must be a distinction in attitudes toward the who must be killed, a Jew who is fleeing and can be left alone by persecuted for his crimes in the Judaical area, and peaceful individuals who gives himself up and can be integrated or given time to live. And listen to this. Educated Jews and experts in the areas of medicine, engineering, technology, and civilian and military industry should be trained in a Palestinian for some time and should not be allowed to live and take with them the knowledge and experience they acquired while living in our land. And my friend that I met in Cairo said everything was happening and we didn't notice, because it's kind of a revolution or military coup that happened in Gaza Strip. Not they saw it, and unfortunately, also the Israeli intelligence.
I think that Hamas are not more than 13% from the Palestinian population.
30.
30. Not more. And I think that there is a big difference between Hamas and Fatah. And Israel must recognize and must accept the Biden plan for the Middle East, for the region. We must change the reality and in the Middle East by the access of the Arab state, Arab moderate state, Saudi, Emirate, Egypt.
Can I just clarify? So you're saying you support the Biden plan for a two-state solution?
This is the only solution for our region.
With Saudi Arabia and other more moderate Arab countries.
If we want to bring the kidnaps home, we must accept the Biden solution. I knew Sinwar. I knew very well Sinwar and all the leaderships of Hamas. He's afraid from one thing, just from control of Fatah on Gaza. He lost the military power, but he wants to resist as a control in Gaza, civilian control. And afraid from Fatah, afraid from Egypt. Hamas is part of the Muslim Brothers. They are the enemies of Egypt, enemies of all over the world, the Arab world. And if we accept the Biden plan, we will change the control on Gaza, and Hamas will lose the military force, but also the society and political control on Gaza. And then he will return to the to make a deal about if we are asking what was the reason of the 7 October attack against Israel. The first reason was to release prisoners. It was against the Shalit deals, because in Shalit deal, we released just 415 prisoners that was charged for life sentences.
So, Gilad Shalit, maybe you can explain better.
Okay.
There was an exchange of how many
1,025 prisoners, most of them were Hamas, who were sentenced for life sentence in prison, 415. And
but just 415 were
from Hamas, the other from the other organization for the Palestinians. It was the point that something happened. When the prisoners released to Gaza Strip and the West Bank, they took control over the movement. And the consequences is October 7th. Hamas was founded, it's very important to mention here, as a charity movement. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin found the movement in Gaza Strip to help the poor people by giving them money, food, schools, kids garden, clubs, sports club, and others. And during the year, it was a process that changed Hamas. They are part of the Muslim Brotherhood, the same, but they were very confused between what the meaning of this movement in Gaza Strip. Is it still a charity, welfare organization, or a military organization? And all the time it was a fight between two branches. And of course, what happened in Gaza Strip at the 90s, the military wing won, and they took control, and the consequences in 2007, they made a military coup. And it's very important to mention it, because I know that many people around the world that not familiar or so familiar with the conflict, they don't know or they forgot what is happening in Gaza and what happened in Gaza in 2007. It was a military coup. The PLO, the Palestinian representative who was elected at the election polls, were kicked out from the land, from Gaza Strip, and they started the military control in Gaza Strip. But more than that, I think that what Israel did, it was all the time mistake how to deal with Hamas. I think what happened in Hamas during the year, that we didn't want to hear the moderate voices of Hamas, like the political voices I mentioned before, Ismail Haniyeh, Dr. Razi Hamad, he was part of the deal who dealt with the Gilad Shalit prison exchange. And by our mistake, we just get up the extremists of Hamas, and this is the consequences. And more than that, just to mention it, I think the behavior of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who support, I think, not directly, but support Hamas, because it was his conception to separate between Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and feeding the monster by Qatarian money.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. So what do we do with Netanyahu?
I could predict it.
What do we do with Netanyahu? How do you have the intelligence to take out 3 Iranian generals, and yet you're not aware of an entire attack happening for hours and hours over the Gaza border? It just seems extraordinary. Now, based on what you're saying, the military coup could also have happened recently when Sinwar takes over, when he's released from prison. That's a kind of a coup as well, it sounds like. And yet Netanyahu not only seems unaware, but is seemingly strengthening Hamas, at least because he thinks he can control them. I always thought that was a conspiracy theory, but you all seem to agree that that's what's happening. How could Netanyahu get it so wrong? And what do you think the way forward is?
In 2014, in April 2014, Netanyahu got from the Israeli Shin Bet the plan of Sinwar. It was a plan that was revealed to the Israeli Shin Bet, and the head of Shin Bet approached to Netanyahu and gave him the plan. Hamas was planning to build tunnels, to enter behind the tunnels and attack Israel. What I've learned in my last research, that the protective edge war started because the plane, not because the 3 teenagers who were kidnapped by Hamas member.
This is 2014 we're talking about?
2014. And Netanyahu knew about this attack. And even though after 51 days, he realized that he can't use again the slogan that he's strong against Hamas and he can eliminate Hamas or exterminate Hamas. This is something else. It was the longest war in Israel until 2014, a 51 days war against Hamas in Gaza Strip. After the war, Netanyahu decided to find another enemy, not Hamas, because Hamas can't be eliminated by the Israeli force. And the new enemy was Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA. And at this time, it began the conception of Netanyahu. We can control Hamas and humiliate the PA. And even though I have many witnesses and many reports that the heads of the Shin Bet dealt with Mahmoud Abbas, fighting what they called the revoke of the Third Intifada, and for Netanyahu, for his interest, just blur the PA and put him as an enemy. And even the conception to control in the IDF, the intelligence, that the conception was, we don't have to afraid from Gaza Strip, from the Hamas. We just put a fence, a very expensive fence. It was cost billions of dollars, and they can live there, and we can take control. No army there, by the way. Only 2 brigades were in the October 7th, and we put our eyes in the West Bank. So that's what happened in October 7th, when I've been asked what would take so long to the army to come and save the people in the kibbutzim. There was no army. All Israel was captured by Netanyahu conception. And unfortunately, this is the consequences.
Israel was based more and more on technological intelligence and less on human intelligence. But the technological cannot give you the indication about when the enemies want to attack you. You can recognize, you can achieve information about the planes, but the moment of the attack, just a human source can give you the indication, the real indication. And about the Netanyahu government and Netanyahu didn't want to pay the price of the peace process because the government is the extreme government. And I think the solution is with the Fatah and with the Palestinian Authority. There is a big difference between Hamas and Fatah. In the West Bank, they cooperated with us security cooperation against Hamas. Even in the prison, prisoners, the leaderships of Fatah, they said, informed Hamas that the real enemies is Hamas, not Israelis. And they cooperated with us outside, but it was a concept, a political concept, of Netanyahu to make a differentiation between the West Bank and Gaza. It's a big mistake. Hamas becomes stronger. We give them money from Qatar because the decision was in 2018. It was Abu Mazen decision to stop the money that is sent to the Gaza, and Israel give the money by Qatar. The Qatar is worse Arab state. They support the Muslim brothers. They support the revolutions against all the Arab regimes in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia.
We're talking about Qatar or Qatar?
Yes,
Qatar, yes, of course. It was a big mistake to bring money from Qatar.
So I want to get to audience questions, but maybe this is a two-part question that you could answer briefly that are very tough questions, and they're purely military. No, they're not purely military, they're moral as well. Number one, did Israel overdo it in the first days following October 7th with the reprisals? Number two, what should the response to 400 missiles and drones coming from Iran be? Should that also be a very tough reprisal? As brief as you can be.
Yes, two different questions.
Okay.
Yes.
But military.
Let's start with my, my expertise in Gaza Strip, less in the Iranian. I think we overdo it. I feel uncomfortable that in Gaza Strip there is almost 40,000 people who were killed, most of them civilians. I don't feel good with this. I think that Israel did wrong. All the military action war in Gaza Strip was wrong because we have to retire. We have to respond, but differently. And I think the anger was stronger than the plane. I met my friend in Cairo 2 weeks ago, and he told me, I know when I saw what's happening, I saw hostages near my house. I saw the chairs. I saw how they were happy. And what he said, I told to my wife, this is the end of Gaza. But even I expected the Israeli respond, I didn't think that it will be like that. To kill one Hamas leader, to assassinate him, 200 Palestinians were killed with him. So as an Israeli, as a human being, I don't feel good with this, uncomfortable. But I can say more than that. I know that Hamas used the Palestinians as human shields. So this is the dilemma. How you exterminate Hamas and keep the Palestinians, civilians Palestinians safe? I have no answer. I'm not a general. I served in the army, but not in the unit that I know how to fight in Gaza Strip. But I must say it clearly. I don't feel good with what is happening in Gaza Strip. And after 6 months, we didn't release the hostages. We have now more than 100, I think the number 133. I'm not sure that all of them are alive. I know clearly that many of them were killed by the Israeli bomb, and I understand the anger of the Israeli. I also was very angry, very sad, very mourned, but not like that.
Okay, and perhaps, Yuval, you could address Iran?
we have to respect the international law. We must do that. We are a part of the international community. We have to, revenge is not a response, is not a response of what Hamas did in October 7. We're not revenge.
Okay, okay. But we did talk about the dilemma, which is you still have to try to get...
We have a dilemma, a big dilemma.
You still have to try to incapacitate, and there will be civilian casualties as a result, I suppose.
Our basis is under hospitals,
Right.
schools, universities. It's not easy to fight against a regime who sacrifice its population.
Okay, let's...
And we have to start the war and then from the south, not from the north, to cut the line between Egypt, the border between Egypt and Gaza Strip. By the way, most of the people around the world, they don't know that there is still a border not just between Israel and Gaza, but from Egypt to Gaza.
In Rafah.
So the boycott and the blockade is from two sides. Right. But all the time, the Israelis are blamed to close Gaza, but even the Egyptian, because they are afraid from the Palestinians. So we're in trap, they're in trap, and
here we are. First question, is there a Begin and a Sadat who might rise up and make peace?
yes.
In other words, do we have the leadership?
We don't
on
have
both sides?
no Begin in our side and not Sadat in the other side.
I was 18 years old when Sadat came first to Israel. I was a soldier in the intelligence, the intelligence unit in the IDF. And I remember the day that Sadat came to Israel. And it was, I think, the happiest day in Israel.
Yeah.
And I also want to tell you that we were suspected of his motives and intention. There were rumors that when the Sadat airplane will land in the Ben Gurion airport, the door will shut up, opened, and terrorists should kill all the Israeli leadership. But no, Sadat came to Israel, and he believed that the only solution is peace. Unfortunately, today, there is leadership in the Israeli leadership and the Palestinian leadership. They don't want peace. Because something happened, and it's not a national war anymore. We now in an era of a religious war between Jews and Muslims. And with religious war, there is no compromise and no solution, unfortunately.
Sadat said at that time war is all ready to sacrifice 1 million soldiers, Egypt soldiers, against Israel. But in the moment when he decided to make a peace with Israel, I was 6 years old, 7. I stand with the Egypt's flag in Beersheba. We want a peace. This is the only solution in our region.
Okay, so now we have a question about the hostages, and I don't know if you can answer this, but what do you believe will happen with the hostages? Is it done? Is there any hope? You mentioned the Biden plan, but that seems pretty far off.
We have to accept the Biden plan, not now. 4 months before, we lose the time. And now I think that we have just 15 50 hostages in life, not more. Every day we lost one and another one. And the solution is the one solution. To accept.
Which is a two-state solution with
change,
alliances.
to change the control on Gaza, the civilian control on Gaza.
I don't know how many hostages are alive, but we know the price for releasing them from the captivity. The price is Hamas asked to stop the war and release the hostages and maybe all of the prisoners from the Israeli prison. And the question is, are we ready for it or not? Because I don't think that we can push Hamas and fight Hamas and they release the hostages. Hamas, the leadership of Hamas, especially Yahya Sinwar, they are religious people. They believe that what we've said before, they're a messenger of God or messenger of Muhammad. And they want something, only one thing, stop the war and release the prisoners. The question is if Netanyahu's government are ready for it or not. And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I don't want to put myself in his position because it's a huge dilemma. If you accept Hamas requests, then you lost the war. But I must tell you something that one of respective journalists told me a few days ago. He told me things that even to admit there is no victory is a kind of victory. So until after 6 months that we didn't release the hostages, we didn't assassinate Yahya Sinwar, and we didn't eliminate Hamas, maybe it's the time to calculate our steps again and think what will be the next day. Even more, there is no Israeli plan what will be in the next day. What is the next day?
Right.
Who will rule Gaza?
That's one of the questions. Ella has 3 questions, and that was number 3. What will be in Gaza? What does the future hold? Obviously, you can't answer this, but do you see any foreseeable plan to rebuild, to control, to rule?
We must change the reality in Gaza. We saw what's happened with the Hamas regime in Gaza. We had an opportunity in 2008 and in 2014 to change the control on Gaza, the Hamas control, the Hamas regime. And we didn't do that. It was a mistake. And we paid the price now.
At the beginning of the war, I was interviewed by the IDF intelligence. They would like to use my experience and ask me, what do you think would be better for us? Who will control in Gaza Strip after Hamas will not exist anymore? And I remember that my first answer was, I don't sure that Hamas will be eliminated, but let's think about a rescue team that will take care of Gaza Strip. And they asked me what the meaning of the rescue team, and I said, let's take businessmen, respected people in Gaza Strip, and a combination of delegation from the Emirate, from Jordan, from Egypt, from UN, even from Qatar. But I didn't know something that I know now, that Hamas is still in power. And we can't calculate or we can't reform any rescue team when Hamas in power, because they will be killed by them. They murder them. But I know that Israelis, until now, they don't have plan because Netanyahu declared that he doesn't want the PA come back to Gaza Strip, and Mahmoud Abbas said he doesn't want to go to Gaza Strip, but only with the political program, political deal, something that will be not only for the return to Gaza Strip, and that's it. But I know something more, that the next generation in Gaza Strip will be worse than the previous or the existing generation. People who lost their houses, people in Gaza Strip who lost because of Hamas and because of the war. They are victims of Hamas. They lost their houses. I think that about 60% of the buildings in Gaza were destroyed. Even though the refugees in the south will come back to the north, they don't have any house to live. Many of them lost their parents, lost their families. So the next generation in Gaza Strip, we as Israeli will suffer from what we've saw now after October 7th.
There are three options of control of Hamas, of Gaza. One is Hamas control, is the worst one. The second is Israel's control, is unacceptable. And the third, the best one, is Palestinian Authority's Fatah control on Gaza. This is the only solution in Gaza.
I would like to give an optimistic thought that I have many friends in Gaza Strip. They all the time tell me, if Hamas will exist, when they came out from the tunnels, the Palestinians will revenge, will do your work, your job. They will kill them because they have nothing to lose. They lost their houses, they lost their families, and they revenge what Hamas did for them. So I think this is the only optimistic thing that I can say.
So, thank you. We have time for really one or two last questions. This one's about the diaspora. And I often struggle with this because maybe we have no right to say anything, but then we say, but we're supplying Israel with all these weapons. Of course we have a right to say something.
You have the right.
We have the right.
But here's the problem is we don't have the insight that somebody living there has, like the two of you. So I often wonder, okay, so you have a hostage swap with soldiers. Haven't you just repeated the very thing that freed Yahya Sinwar? Haven't you just incentivized more hostage-taking? What about a ceasefire? Of course, we should have a ceasefire now, but how can you have a ceasefire without return of hostages? What do you see the role of the diaspora, and let's just say America and American Jews in this? Should we just be quiet? Should we be protesting? Should we offer our own perspective?
We have the American people, the Jewish American people that support Israel. And it's very important. I think the diaspora support Israel, not the Israeli government. And it's very important. I've been in Nir Oz a few weeks ago, and I've heard the Federation of Chicago that decide to help to rebuild Nir Oz. They rebuilt Nir Oz not for the Israeli government or the things that Israel done something wrong or failure of Israel or the extremist Israeli right wing. They support the Israelis. I think Israel is strong because Israel is strong, because there is a very good people in Israel, and the American Jewish support. It's very important for us. And as you said, if you heard, I criticize the Israeli government. And all the time, I think that I can find any holes between their decision. But still, I'm an Israelis. I love Israel. I would like Israel to be a better place. And I think the Jewish American community can help us to bring Israel to a better place.
And you have to say what your positions. And I think that we need that your community will be a strong community. you are a part of the Israelis, you are a part of Jewish people, and we need the support of your side, because our government, I don't think so, that they can resolve all of the problem of Israel, but we need the support of the Jewish people, as a Jewish people, not as a government that they had a position, political position, and the solution is not all the time the real solution and the right solution.
So, one last question. Does killing Sinwar solve it?
Yes, this is will be kind of the victory picture, and what will be, I think it will be something that Netanyahu's government can say, okay, the war is over because we killed Sinwar, and it's a kind of escape from the war, because we all the time try to find a victory picture, and until now we don't have it. Killing Sinwar will not eliminate Hamas, but give us any satisfaction that we've done something very good.
Kill Sinwar is maybe a small victory,
Yes, small victory.
but the number 2 of Hamas's ID is not one person. The number 2 is Orchi Mushta. Is worse than Sinwar. I knew him from the prison. He was than Sinwar. Then it's not going to resolve any problem.
Okay, Shlomi, Yuval, we really, really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I hope you learned a lot. I know that we did. If we can get you. If we can get you. There we go. You did a great job. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. We so appreciate your continued support of the Federation of the Library of Fairfield University. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more on another day, on another week. It's going to be a great year. Thank you so much for coming, and good night.